Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Elisa Sklar. I am the VP of Marketing at GIS Planning, and today we are going to be looking at the third in our series of EDO roundtables, looking at how different regions are planning for COVID-19 economic recovery. In today's roundtable, we have three guests with us. We have Dan Silverman, who is the VP of Foreign Direct Investment for Investissement Québec International. We have Megan Baker, who's the president of the Fayette County Development Authority. And we have Dean Whittaker, the founder, president, and CEO of Whittaker Associates. And I am going to bring up the webcams for all the people that we have here today. Now, we've got a little bit of a technical issue, so Megan is with us, even though you are not able necessarily to see her. There's always a technical issue at some point, but I think 8 weeks into a pandemic, we've all become accustomed to workarounds for those kinds of things. And so we're really delighted to have you here with us today, Dan and Dean and Megan. It is really wonderful to have you here. And I am going to start off by turning this over to Dan Silverman, who is going to show us some slides and talk to us a little bit about what's happening at Invest Quebec.
Great, thanks so much, Alyssa, and thanks so much for having me. I think it's sharing my screen right now, and you can see that, everybody. So just a quick little background. I'm Dan Silverman. I'm the Vice President for Direct Investment with Invest Quebec, and due to COVID, I have been working from home more than I have been working with Invest Quebec. I think I've been in the office a total of about 15 days. Including some travel. So just a little bit of a background. We're an economic development agency and a financing corporation, which is not something you find very much in economic development across the Americas or Europe. I think a little bit with Singapore EDB. We have over 700 employees in 17 different offices in Quebec, and my team as the Invest Quebec International Foreign Direct Investment Division has 12 offices abroad. We're based in 4 cities in the United States. We have 3 in Europe, 1 in India, China, Japan, and Korea. Our mission: contribute to Quebec's economic development with our financial solutions, foster growth, local and international, and support job creation in all regions of Quebec. So we don't just cover Montreal or Quebec City, we cover the entire province. So what COVID has done for us in the last several weeks or several months is it's made us really align with our partners that we have. And you know, we're Invest Quebec, and we are a division of the government, but we also have the economy, innovation, and exports, as well as the international relations and francophonie. And then we also have our municipal or regional partners with Montreal International, Quebec International, and then federal partners with Invest Quebec Invest in Canada and Global Affairs, which is the Trade Commissioner Service Abroad. So we are essentially the centerpiece for foreign investment in the province of Quebec with these partners, and have aligned ourselves with them to make sure that not only are we supporting foreign subsidiaries that are here in the province and new and greenfield projects that are still in our pipeline, but that we're also supporting Quebec-based businesses here and abroad. This also comes into play with our export team and our immigration and talent team. So under the Invest Quebec International brand, you have my side, which is foreign direct investment, as well as immigration and talent attraction. And then you have the export side, which is closely aligned with us under Marie-France Lalonde, who's joining our team actually next week. And what we've done is we've incorporated all FDI activities and export activities into one organization, which is Invest Quebec International. So how we responded to COVID and how we continue to do FDI in the period of COVID. Well, the first thing we did is created an IQI FDI crisis team. So it's made up of 2 of our in-market representatives that are still in market, representatives of our foreign subsidiary team, and representatives of our international projects team, so that we kind of cover all bases. We cover the ability to service our existing businesses, we cover the ability to service greenfield opportunities, and then ones that are also already down the pipeline. The mandate of this team is to really identify and support at-risk subsidiaries with our regional partners. So working with Quebec International, Montreal International, Gatineau, Sherbrooke. Same thing on the greenfield side, but also establish a dynamic communication plan, both to our economic development partners, federal all the way down, to the companies that are out there. And also what this has made us do is it made us look strategically at how we're prospecting. So we've always had an idea of what our supply chain gaps might be, but this has really opened it up with a whole different type of I would say, division and targeting that we've had based on the government's strategic priorities. One of the things that we have in Quebec, which is very nice, is very well priced power. And this has changed a little bit of how we've gone out and started to do prospecting in this time, looking at opportunities in the data center field, where manufacturing has kind of shrunk a little bit in terms of the volume of projects. The data center side has picked up. So this team is really responsible for kind of throwing ideas around, communicating that to the other divisions of Invest Quebec. As I mentioned, Invest Quebec is a financing corporation, so we do invest in companies. So we've been very strategic in identifying opportunities, not just in the support of PPE, but in the support of the Quebec economy for now and the future. Pact program, which is the French acronym for the Concerted Temporary Action Program for Businesses. It's a new emergency measuring fund that the Quebec government has put in place. In fact, Invest Quebec, not just Invest Quebec International, but the entire of Invest Quebec is the group that is helping to move that forward. It's primarily for businesses operating in Quebec, and it's in a temporary situation. So cash flow has been one of the big things that companies have called us on. Just to give you an idea, typically in about a year, we field 2,000 calls, and probably in the first week, we fielded 1,700 for this program. So what this does is it allows us to help support businesses that are based here in Quebec, headquartered here in Quebec, as well as foreign businesses that have Quebec operations. A little bit more details on it. So again, I mentioned cash flow issues that are temporary, the supply of raw materials or products, the problem they have with that, an inability or a substantial decreased ability to deliver goods, products, or services. So we're really trying to help businesses keep their doors open and keep their employees employed. The way that we do this is through loan guarantees, which is our preference. So that's a loan coming from Invest Quebec, close cooperation, so shared risk with a bank, credit guarantee, which is not something we did before, but because of COVID, we're now looking at doing that. So for new lines of credit or increasing existing lines of credit. And the minimum amount is about $50,000, and there's no refinancing there, but we're looking at about a $50,000 plus. PACME is another program that we put in place, which is really a job retention program. It's a $100 million program by the Quebec government. So it's for training, for salaries of employees, up to $100,000 for expenses of $100,000 or less, and 50% for expenses over $100,000 to $500,000. What this is we find this is when we're looking at a lot of our supply chain that is having to take their current production lines and switch them over, whether it's for PPE or whether it's to service different clients or whether they're adding to the production lines. This is taking certain talent skills and helping them get trained so that they could still have a job. So someone that's working in one division of the company can come and support another division of the company there. So like I said, strategy for adjusting or modifying activities, digital skills, French language training, basic employee training. There are about 4 or 5 other programs. So the Emergency Assistance Program for small and medium-sized businesses, that's a $150 million program. There's been deferral both on income and sales tax for further down the road, and loan guarantees that are in progress. So giving a moratorium on the repayment of loans, and that I'm been kind of in close proximity to with some of our existing clients that have asked for a deferral of X number of months so that they can keep their doors open and their employees employed rather than paying the Quebec government. And one that probably hits closest to home when you talk about small businesses and local businesses is we've kind of called it Buy Quebec is what I would call the English translation, Le Panier Bleu, the blue basket. And this is really encouraging people in Quebec to buy local. And this number's a little bit old, to be quite honest with you. It's probably about 2 weeks old. So we're north of 8,000 businesses that have registered for this program. Our political leaders are very aggressive in promoting this, making sure to buy local, and helping support existing businesses and small businesses throughout Quebec that are here. So this is just kind of an overview of the programs we've come in place. One of the things that the COVID period has allowed me to do as new vice president is allowed me to review the structure of my team in foreign direct investment. And we plan on announcing a new structure next Tuesday to be more aligned with our partners, to take advantage of some of the opportunities that we see in place and the priorities of our government that on foreign direct investment, and really allows us to build a collaborative, cooperative, and transparent relationship with our regional partners, our federal partners, and our municipal partners across the board. So, we've taken this time by having, 11 of our 12 in-market reps staying in market to look at opportunities that are still out there for us and still represent the province of Quebec while servicing Quebec-based businesses, but ensuring that we haven't really taken the pedal off our foot off the pedal when it comes to FDI opportunities, but understanding that, it's a lot easier to keep a company in Quebec than it is to go get a company, focusing on how we can service our foreign subsidiaries while still doing the greenfield piece. So I've taken this time with my team to revise our structure, look at what our partners are doing, look at some of the best practices around North America, Europe, and Asia, and align that to what we think is going to work best for us, not just because of COVID. This was an exercise before COVID, but we think that, we do think that COVID has given us that ability to do that now. And that's kind of our plan for the next couple of weeks is launching that new structure.
Great, thank you so much, Dan. I've been taking notes here. I've got some questions that we can ask you afterwards. I really appreciate that. Looking forward to hearing more about it. I am going to pass this from here to Megan Baker. Megan is the president of the Fayette County Development Authority.
All right, I'm used to using Zoom, and so this is a little bit different for me. But anyway, so shifting gears, responding to change and technology issues. I'm Megan Baker. I am Vice President for the Fayette County Development Authority, and we are located about 30 miles south of Atlanta. So we're part of the Atlanta metro region. And we're a community, we're a county of about 115,000 residents. So, okay, so we kind of looked at our response, reflecting back based on 4 major trends we saw. And that would be first that data infrastructure projects are really rising to the top for importance as we're all on a webinar today. That BR business retention and community support have really risen to the top in terms of importance. There's been a 50% decrease in new projects. We haven't seen a lot of new projects. Our plan for the year had started as we're going to go out and market Fayette County. We're going to go to conferences, and so we quickly adjusted what our focus was based on the project decrease and really supporting our existing businesses. And I will say on this piece too, we added another area of focus, which was our small businesses. And we don't usually work with those as much, like your mom and pop stores, but we have worked with our local cities to really figure out how we can help them support those businesses as well. The third trend that kind of captures our response is digital outreach and messaging. So we have really ramped up our digital strategies, really ramped up our social media and connecting with our existing industries through surveys, through webinars, through social media in a way we've never done really before. And then finally, the fourth trend that I want to highlight is new workforce challenges. So before we were focused on placemaking, talent attraction, getting millennials to come, and we quickly realized that now businesses, instead of recruiting millennials, are really focused on how can they get their employees back to work? How can they do that safely? What are policies they need to implement? So just kind of go through each of these trends. Again, data infrastructure, we've seen some tech sector projects, and I think that's because of our virtual shift right now. We're doing education virtually, healthcare, shopping, e-commerce, going to conferences virtually. And projects overall that Georgia's seen are data centers, cannabis, gaming. So I guess we all respond to the COVID differently. But what does that mean for us here in Fayette County? Well, we are very much focused on data center technology campus. We are also home to Pinewood Atlanta Studios. So we're also looking at different ways to support what they're doing and digital media. And then just looking at future sites that we could potentially recruit technology. So an effect of the sectors we're seeing has caused us to really shift what our target sectors are. And they were aerospace, which we all know is kind of paused right now. So just really realigning who we're targeting. The next trend, business retention. We reached out to each of our manufacturers. We don't have a huge manufacturing base, but we had 40 manufacturers who responded. We asked if they could shift gears for COVID supplies, both on behalf of the White House and the state level. We also, right now, are working on new employee policies and sharing best practices between telework, staggered shifts, 6 feet distancing. We also had a COVID-19 resource page, which I think we all have implemented. And then mid-April, May, we really wanted to transition to business support and reopening. We felt like our businesses had fatigue with COVID-19 surveys, the term COVID-19. And so just really shifting the narrative to, okay, we're going to get through this. How do we get through this? And our community and small business support. This has been another huge focus area that, as I said before, we didn't really traditionally look at. We mostly focus on large manufacturing plants. But we reached out to 2,000 small businesses and received responses from 370 of those, just trying to figure out what their concerns are and where we could help them. And so I just kind of put some sample responses of our survey. What have they had to reduce their hours? What impacts are your business experiencing? We also asked about the SBA loans. And so through this process, we were able to work with our cities to reach out to some of these businesses and help them with unemployment, or maybe refer them to a loan provider or talk to them about using their bank. And so it was very helpful. And I feel like especially a lot of the micro businesses who don't work with lenders on a day-to-day basis, they weren't sure where to go, what to do, and it was very overwhelming. So, and another support for small business, here's my plug for GIS Planning. We launched Zoom Business with our local newspaper to put out, to advertise all the businesses that are open. And so during that process, worked with the great team at GIS Planning to really make it fit what we wanted the platform to look like and the resources to provide it. And so we added options like gift cards, photos, and so really ramped up that platform. We now have 75 businesses included in the platform. So just really trying to get that going and helping our local businesses, because a lot of them will say, I want to list, but I don't have time. And so helping facilitate that process. We've also partnered with our chamber. They launched Feeding Fayette in late March, which really promoted all of our local restaurants, and breakout takeout. So every Thursday, everyone goes around and takes pictures of getting food takeout from restaurants. And then they also launched an Open for Business for their chamber members. So on all fronts, we're really trying to support our chamber members, our small businesses who may not be chamber members, but really helping those businesses. And so just gathering data from our businesses, looking at what our partners are doing around the Atlanta metro region, we really examined a lot of different support structures. Some of our regional partners have grant programs. At our level, we felt like the grants we could provide would be very limited, and so instead we looked at, okay, what are some ordinances we can do to help our businesses? And so one of our local cities, they relaxed sign ordinances, they refunded alcohol permit fees if the restaurants were closed, and they also extended occupational tax, which the businesses said that's what they told us, these are some of the things that would help them. And for grant programs, the City of Atlanta has launched a lot of different grant programs, so if that's something your community is interested in, I definitely encourage you to check out ATL Strong as well. So finally, our third trend, digital outreach and messaging. Again, we really ramped up our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. This is something we would do occasionally, and now we are doing it all the time. So as Department of Labor updates come out, as Small Business Administration loan information comes out. So just keeping our social media up to date and communicating with our community and our businesses. We also hosted webinars. We actually host a lot of film projects in Fayette when it's not COVID time. And so during COVID, filming has kind of slowed down. And so we really wanted to do something still for the film industry. So we hosted how to list your home as a film location and how to be an extra in the Georgia film industry. And we had a lot of interest in those. That was good. We also did a digital strategies during COVID-19 webinar, and we had an infographic on what were some free local digital strategies that our businesses could implement. And we had about 35 attend that, and really well received because it wasn't overly complex. It was things they could take and then build upon. And you're not going right to an e-commerce system, but it would just, so some of the social media, some of how you can get to selling online. Finally, workforce and emerging needs. And this was the fourth trend that we have observed and that we're kind of figuring out how we can support our businesses as well. We shifted really from that talent attraction, placemaking, millennial hipsterbia, to really focusing on how we can help our employees return safely to work. Another challenge some of our employers are having now is that employees can opt to stay on unemployment instead of returning to work if they don't feel safe coming to work, or if they have challenges with childcare. So our businesses have had to cut back their hours to really adjust to this new reality of the workforce. And then the final thing is we've had many of our companies reach out and wondering what everyone's doing in terms of teleworking, screening employees, and ensuring that their facilities are clean and there are adequate hygiene protocols in place. So we're all just in this reopening stage right now. And I think that's it. Yep.
That is fantastic, Megan. Thank you so much. It's very helpful to see as you walk us through the 4 different areas, the specific examples of what that actually looked like for Fayette County, and the collaboration that you've been doing, the shifts. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff that I would love to chat about, and we will do so after our third presenter. We've got with us Dean Whittaker from Whittaker and Associates. And Dean, I know you have been very, very busy since this pandemic hit. I have seen several of the webinars you've been in. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
Well, I'm going to share with you a couple things. Let me get my slides up and running here for just give me a moment.
Sure. I think there you go.
Let me get back to the top here. That's me. A couple of things. 2 months ago now, Eric Canada called and asked me a question. They said, how are companies responding to COVID-19? And again, Eric runs a company called Plain Canada Limited, which also does a synchronous software program to do BRV surveys. So he's had a lot of experience, a lot of data. And so he and I collaborated back then, 2 months ago, and said, all right, well, let's go out and let's go find out how are companies responding to COVID. So we designed a survey instrument along with 25 economic development organizations helped us design it. And then 350 economic development organizations helped us distribute it. And then we have now received back 5,350 surveys. So a pretty good take on in terms of a large data set. The survey, and I won't go into the survey details unless you want me to. I kind of, in the time we have available, you can go to the website and actually see the actual surveys, and I'll give you that link. But the idea behind it is we surveyed these 5,320 companies, and then we built a dashboard to show to analyze the results of those surveys. So the first thing was data collection. Next thing was analyze the surveys, and then the action element is what do you do with the results? And that's kind of what the whole thing was about, is giving economic development organizations the tools that they need in order to reopen their businesses. And this is a near real time. This survey is done about every 2 weeks. And so you're seeing as close to real time about what's happening with businesses and how they're responding to COVID that I think is out there. So this is a collaborative effort of a lot of people to put together the data necessary to give us a picture of what's happening. We actually looked at 4 areas in the survey. The first was kind of operations. Are companies able to operate in this environment? Are they allowed to be open? Have they been shut down by the state, or are they part of the essential list of companies that can stay open? Or are those companies the ones that are shut down now because of stay at home, that their employees are not allowed to come to work? And so there's a whole raft of operational questions we ask, in addition to, and probably some of the most important now, is supply chain questions. Can you ship and can you receive merchandise? Are you able to get what you need to make what you make? And are you able to ship that to your customers? And are they there to receive it? Last evening, I had a fascinating conversation with a supply chain manager from a company in Zealand. And the name of the company is Evoqua. They make large commercial water filtration systems. And he shared with me just some of the challenges in his line of work. He said initially, no problem. And what you're going to see in the survey results is just that. No problem with supply chain. Well, what happened? Well, they had supplies en route, right? Coming from China and from other suppliers in the US. Those parts were either en route or they had them on site. And so for the first couple of weeks, maybe a month, there was no supply side issue. So our survey kind of almost reversed itself after a month. One was saying, oh yeah, no problem. And then later it says, holy cow, we're having a problem not only getting supplies, but a bigger problem now is our customers are closed and they can't receive our product. And also they won't pay us until they receive our product. And so that result is cash flow issues for Evoqua, because they're looking at it, okay, this is a custom design built, highly engineered product. And now they're sitting on their floor space. So here's another issue you don't think about from supply chain, floor space. Where do they put this stuff until their customers reopen so they can ship it? Another issue they have, which I thought was fascinating, is there's 7 product lines within the company, and they're all competing for that same limited floor space. They're also all competing for that same limited capital. So you think about both internal and external things that go on with supply chains, things you wouldn't normally think about. And these are things that come out when you start asking people about their situation. And so that's why we do the survey. And so then the response is, how can an economic development organization help them? And what do they need? And how would that best be done? So those are the kind of questions that we're working on. And so I'm going to take you through a couple of the results. This is a 4-page Microsoft Business Intelligence dashboard. So that's what you're seeing as we look right now. And this is really looking at what's happening. So the first panel is looking at the operational status. Are they open? Are they closed? Are they able to operate remotely? Interestingly enough, so many manufacturers cannot. And so they're either making things, or 50% of our employment in West Michigan is in manufacturing. That's an enormously large amount of manufacturing capacity we have. Most of our manufacturers are operating, interestingly enough. Some have done a pivot and making PPE stuff. Others are making essential pieces and parts that go into the supply chain. As of Monday, this past, our companies are now allowed to, our manufacturers all are allowed to open, because we have another thing coming up on May 23rd, and that is the automobile OEMs, original manufacturers, are going to start making cars again. So in order to supply them, the parts companies have to get in gear now in order to fill up the pipeline with the pieces and parts that go into the 30,000, literally 30,000 pieces and parts that go into making an automobile. And remember, if you're missing any one of those parts, that car cannot be sold. So you have to have all 30,000 pieces and parts come together at the same time in the same place to make a car. Now that's changing with electric cars, and I'll not get into that detail, but you get the gist of the idea. Then we looked at also other issues relative to their workforce. You know, how many have reduced their workforce, and how many don't know, and how many plan to do so in the future? Are these permanent reductions or are they temporary? And then the last question we looked at is the finance. What's your financial situation? Are you able to continue an operation? How long can you continue an operation? Now, that's an interesting question. So let's take this water filtration company. What happens if their customers cannot take delivery because they're closed, and now they can't get the cash flow necessary to keep the business open? That's a problem. One of the things that came out in the survey, and I think it came out, Megan, in some of your comments as well, the small business sector is just getting clobbered. And we're losing about 12% of our small businesses per month for every month that we've been shut down. We're going to lose, literally, by lose, I'm talking about going out of business. Probably about a quarter of our small businesses will go out of business. One of the areas that we looked at, by the way, this gives you an idea from the dashboard of where those surveys are from. Notice that big gap out in the Northwest. I'm working with Portland and Washington now to try to fill that in. Notice also we have people that have picked up the survey and now use it in Europe. The survey is also being evaluated by the UN for use around the world. We've had it translated into Spanish. As I said, we've looked at operations, so we started looking at how are the operations functioning. We also looked at the workforce and how impacted are the workforce. You know, we're seeing 20 million people unemployed right now. That's a huge impact. And are we going to be able to get those workers back? Are they going to? And I think Megan, you mentioned it, and I think Dan, you did as well. You know, are they going to need retraining? Are they going to come back to the same jobs they left? Are they still out there? Maybe, maybe not. Particularly in the accommodation sector. And that's an issue because once you have, I don't know if you've been watching the home delivery business. I mean, last night I had groceries delivered to my house. How cool is that? I thought it was terrific. I didn't have to go to the grocery store. And, you know, when did going to the grocery store become a life-threatening situation? You know, how did that happen? I'm 72 years old. I've got this bullseye on me that says, hey, you're prime meat for the virus. Don't go out of the house. Well, I'm out of the house. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is that we're switching how we do business. Now, so now my retail sector is being decimated because all the delivery folks are all engaged in the process of hiring all the retail people to do delivery. Well, if you're unemployed and your unemployment has run out or will run out, or you can't collect it for whatever reason, that delivery job looks pretty good, you know. And so Marissa delivered my groceries last night, and I didn't have a chance to talk to her because you can't, because of social distancing. So she puts them on the front porch. I say thank you and give a tip, and off she goes. And you know, it's like, how do you give somebody a tip when you can't talk to them and you can't be within 6 feet of them? You know, all kinds of weird stuff going on out there. But the workforce is the issue. So here comes along Amazon. They're going to hire 130,000 people to do deliveries. Throw on top of that Shipt or Instacart, and now you have 500,000 people being hired into the delivery side of the business. Well, I'll tell you what, that delivery stuff is pretty cool. And you know, I'm an Amazon Prime customer from almost the day they started, and I shop local, believe it or not. I have a background that includes managing 3 chambers of commerce. I challenged my Chamber of Commerce board one year to do all their Christmas shopping in town. So I get Megan, I get the buy local stuff, and I think it's very important. Most of our groceries now that we're purchasing come from a small farm nearby where they raise everything. It's a very interesting shift that we've done in terms of personal buy local. A couple other things, finance. This is where it gets really sticky. The problem is SBA, in my opinion, and underline my opinion, is too little too late. And I heard what you said, Dan, about Quebec having some funding grant programs and setting up, and maybe you, I'm sorry, Megan, I think you mentioned Atlanta has set up some grant programs. Unless we do that, our small business sector is going to be decimated. They're going to starve to death before we get there with the SBA. I talked to the SBA, the Emergency Disaster Initiative Fund. They received 6 million applications. 6 million applications. They might get 500 a year, all right? They got 6 million. They have no idea how they're going to process any of that anytime soon. On the other flip side, the PPE money, everyone's afraid to use it because we don't know what the rules are. If we don't spend that money on payroll within 8 weeks, we either have to pay it back or take it on as a loan. And the ability to forgive that loan, turn it into a grant, goes away. So, and then the other company, here's a distillery up in Milwaukee. Their question was, okay, let's hire all these people that we had on our payroll back for 8 weeks, and then let's lay them all off again because we don't have the work for them to do. Same with the woodworking company. Said the same thing. We don't have any demand for product to ship. Why am I bringing people in to have them sit around and be paid for 2 weeks? My daughter works for a construction company out in Oregon, and they received $358,000 of PPE money, and they've got to spend that money within eight weeks. Fortunately for them, they have 9 construction projects about to start up, and as a result, they're able to go back and have them work overtime so they can use up those funds. And so it's just a crazy situation is what I'm trying to say. Bottom line, back to the locals and the people that have some say in this, you're going to have to come up with some local financing system to save your small business. It's not going to come from Washington. Sorry. That's my personal opinion, and it pretty well plays out in the survey results. One of the other questions we ask about planning for the future, how are they planning to restart? There's a great tool out there, and it's the LEAR playbook, L-E-A-R playbook. You'll have to just do a Google search on LEAR, L-E-A-R playbook, and they've mapped out all the things that a business needs to do to reopen. And so those are some of the things. When we're still at the early stage of startup, there's still the scramble for PPE equipment, and there's no coordination. One of the things that came up in our discussion Monday with our task force on the survey was, okay, what's the priority for the PPE equipment within the community? Should the hair salon get it ahead of the manufacturer if there's limited PPE equipment? Who gets it? And what's the strategy for distributing that equipment? There needs to be, and I think I heard, Dan, that there was some effort along those lines in Quebec, more of a strategic look at how do you start up. You look at New York City and how it's phasing in their startup. We're trying to do the same thing here in Michigan. Let's start up as safely as possible, and hopefully we can avoid a second wave of the virus. I'm not optimistic about that personally because I'm in a resort town here. Our beaches are packed. I don't know what that's going to look like down the road, but I'm heading for cover in 2 weeks. Just trust me. As soon as that virus spreads in that crowd at the beach, it's going to be a very challenging time here in West Michigan. I had surgery last week, and it was sort of minor. It was a bladder surgery, but they wanted me in and out of the hospital, and the advice I received was get the surgery done now. You don't want to do it 2 weeks from now, because in 2 weeks we're going to be so busy we won't have room and or the ability to do any further surgeries for a while. So you understand how it's impacting the hospital group. So this is one of the charts this is the third table, and it goes into things like increasing or decreasing revenue. Well, 64% of the companies have increasing revenue, Interestingly enough, some companies are making more money now than they made before. The company I mentioned, this distillery in Milwaukee, they ship 55-gallon drums of sanitizing lotion to hospitals on the West Coast, a whole new line of business for them. 52% can work at home, 72% are unable to. Now, I don't know how those numbers add up, but it's kind of interesting. Able to ship 64%. Those numbers are actually going down, not because they can't produce it, but because the customers aren't there to receive it. And so that's able to receive merchandise mostly, but not always. Remember what happens when you try to make a car and you're a few parts short? That's a problem. Weeks of survivability, it says 13 here. That's because of the big companies in the survey. If you're a large company, you can weather the storm. Small firms, particularly in the 10 to 20 employee range, they're just being hammered. They're payroll to payroll, just like some families are paycheck to paycheck. These people are payroll to payroll, and they have about 30 days worth of revenue to survive. And those are the ones that worry me. Employee morale, 60%. I don't know how you measure that, but that's all right. 42% have been furloughed, which means they keep their health insurance. 42% unpaid furlough. And on-site operations, 50%, remote, 43%. You get some, again, this survey, by the way, can be segmented and filtered by industry, by postal code, by county, by city, by state. So you can actually get down to a zip code level of the survey results for your area. When you look at this survey, you can narrow it down to your specific state, but also to a specific industry. You can look at manufacturing and some of the others. The last table in this chart, and I need to move along here, this is really a chart that shows the results of the survey relative to who's being impacted the most and what will impact the local area the hardest. And at the top of that list, if you have very fine eyesight, is accommodations in recreation. Our restaurants are decimated. Despite our best efforts here in Holland, I try to do drive-by pickup stuff at least twice a week. And we're doing all we can to try to keep our restaurants alive, but it's still not the same. Remember that most restaurants make a third of their revenue from selling alcohol. And so now in Michigan, believe it or not, you can actually have alcohol included in your meal or with your meal. So now they can now sell alcohol with their food, but that's kind of a recent innovation. And you can go down through this list, and I won't take our time today to go through it, but you get the gist of the idea of what the economic impact by, and this is basically 2-digit SIC code stuff. Way down there at the bottom, I think is interesting because the utilities are the least impacted. If you work for an electric utility company, you got the Willy Wonka gold ticket because they will pay their employees for a year, up to a year, to stay home if they're, for whatever reason. And also, well, I won't go into a lot of detail, but basically utility companies, if you're starting over in economic development, go work for a utility. That's the gold ticket. This last slide, and I'm going to share these slides with you. So if you're wondering about it, do you get the slides? This is sorry, my computer's being a little bit, let me back up just a sec. This is called our best practice slide. There's two sites in particular that I think are important. Just Capital is really for large companies and it tracks best practices. What are large companies doing relative to best practices? And the second one down is how are small business? What are small business best practices? And that's a Google that's a Google Doc that's indexed based on particular type of best practices for small business. Very cool stuff done by a fellow out in New Jersey, and he's sharing it with the world. John Hopkins coronavirus tracker is a great site to see how and where and what's happening sector by sector. It will even show you the status of your hospitals in your community relative to the number of open beds and the number of cases they're working on. The fourth one down, McKinsey and Company, is a great document of articles that are very thought-provoking and very informative about various aspects of leading through the crisis. And I think you'll find that one to be useful. The last one on that list is restoreyoureconomy.org, which is the collection of information put out by the International Economic Development Council. Those are my five sites I wanted to share with you. And again, you'll have these slides and you can click on those links. The last thing is to say thank you. And I want to just kind of close my comments with sharing with you a thought. And that is, we have a lot of frontline medical workers out there saving people's lives. But right now, you, as an economic developer, are on the front lines trying to save people's livelihoods. And that's the most important job on the planet right now as we try to reopen our economy. So thank you for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dean. So much to think about there. I really appreciate that. And I know that I want to remind people that we can take your questions. You can put them into the questions field on the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of our screen. I know we're limited to an hour here, and there are so many things that have been brought up in the different presentations that we have here. Just a reminder, all of you, if you'll share your slide deck with me, I will include that in the follow-up email to participants so people can take a look at that. That's a lot to think about. I'm hearing a lot of kind of different things. We have two very different regions, two different countries, and then Dean kind of pulling it together based on the survey results that we're hearing. One of the things that I'm hearing about that I think is quite interesting that both Dan, both you and Megan talked about is this idea of collaboration between organizations, communication, sometimes between organizations that didn't really work together before, or maybe your focus was always on FDI, and now, as you say, Dan, you're thinking about it's easier to keep companies here than maybe at this moment attract new ones. And I know, Megan, you said you were talking about a shift to working with your smallest of the small businesses as well. I wonder, I'd love to hear from you guys about this idea of collaboration. What are some of the things, maybe silver linings or new best practices or things that you'd like to take with you into the recovery period in terms of working with these different partner organizations and associations?
Daniel, you can go first. I'm good.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think there's always been a certain level of collaboration here in Quebec. Officially, we're working on a kind of a memorandum of understanding or an agreement with Quebec International and Montreal International on the longer play of how do we prospect together and how do we best serve clients, and what's the ideal client service model for the three organizations moving forward. And that's one of the things that we're focusing on, but it's also about how to work with our existing clients and our existing subsidiaries to make sure that we're not all knocking on the same doors, and making sure that we're seen as being one united front, especially in this time of COVID, identifying which companies are most at risk, both either a foreign investment here or a local Quebec-based company, and how we can service them together, and who's best positioned to do that service. So whether that is helping, we have one company here that is 31 years in the textile industry in Montreal. It's an immigrant who came here, opened the business. They've been very successful, and a contract from the Quebec government to make hospital gowns saved their business. And to be quite honest with you, we didn't know about this company, and I saw it on Instagram, and I reached out to the company and said, how can we help? So we started to introduce them to other economic development agencies and hospital associations across Canada and the US, and their business has kind of taken back off so that they're able to employ everybody. But we did, neither one of us, Montreal International or Invest Quebec, saw this opportunity to help them do this. And that's our role. That's our role, is to support existing businesses, help them continue to thrive. So I opened up my network to them, and the export team opened up their network to help support them. But it's all part of the, from my end, communication. And if everybody is transparent with what we're doing, and that's part of what comes with my new structure, we're all going to achieve our objectives together.
Great.
So from my point, I guess as far as economic development organizations working together, we're one of the, it's a 12 region in Atlanta working together, and we typically, we're the marketing alliance for Atlanta, but now as we're shifting into how do we help our businesses, it's been really nice that everyone is sharing what they're doing, how they're supporting businesses. I feel like at any point I can reach out to my colleagues, even beyond our Atlanta region, and use some of their things, or figure out, oh, they're sharing this on social media. And so it's just really collaborative, which I really like. And we've always been collaborative, but it echoes more and more now as we're supporting these businesses. And I would say, our business community has been so collaborative. We've had web designers helping restaurants build e-commerce platforms for little to no charge. We've had some of these marketing companies helping these businesses maybe set up a social media platform. So a lot of just collaboration among our business community. I've seen some of our businesses that sell golf carts, they're marketing our restaurants and vice versa. And no one's really competing. We feel like we're all promoting each other. I promote what the chamber does, the chamber promotes what we do. And as far as our manufacturers, we've had several said, what are other local manufacturers doing? And our manufacturers are sharing what they're doing. And so just a real time of sharing and collaboration.
That's great. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the other things that I'm hearing across all of these presentations is this idea of hyperlocality. I mean, not too surprisingly, we're all kind of confined to our regions, confined to our homes. I'm a longtime Amazon Prime member myself, but now when I try and order something, the earliest delivery date is 3 weeks out instead of next day. So what we're seeing is a kind of shift to focusing on the local businesses, that my local independently owned hardware store down the street is a faster place for me to get, whatever I need to repair the leaky sink downstairs or those kinds of things. And I think that also echoes not just among small business. I think there's a real opportunity for small business, the ones who are able to quickly get those websites up, as you're talking about, Megan, to quickly shift to curbside pickup and contactless payment and delivery, but also from a supply chain perspective. And I think, Dan, that's probably something you're seeing, where we have people rapidly pivoting from being a textile company to making hospital gowns, or hockey companies making face shields, for example. And they're now needing to source materials, this kind of nearshoring that's happening because they aren't able to get it far away. I'm just interested what you're seeing in terms of this kind of hyperlocality, and if you think that's something that could pose opportunities for people. Do we expect that maybe to continue past this first recovery phase?
We're seeing that. We're also seeing a lot of reshoring conversations, not necessarily projects, but conversations on the manufacturing side. So I give the example of a shower door manufacturer that's here that gets their glass doors from China. That's where they have their manufacturing facilities, and it's been several months since they've gotten a shipment, and they are building across the US. They have contracts to build, hotels of up to, 500, 600, 700 rooms. So you got 700 rooms without a shower door on it potentially. So they are hurting because they have the ability to do the installation and a smaller ability to do the manufacturing. But if this is something that can happen again in the future, near or long term, they're starting to think about, okay, well, how do we reshore that manufacturing to the Americas to make sure that this never happens to us again, because 70% of our client base is in the US and Canada. And we've seen a lot more of that with that hypersensitivity of buying local, and I want to say the buying local is probably buy North America. But if you can buy Quebec, but not, if they're a non-essential service, they're not manufacturing the product right now. So it's definitely a topic of conversation. We've been approached by several companies that have said, how can you help us bring back our manufacturing, and let's have that conversation. Some people consider that hefty high, some don't. But at the end of the day, we're helping businesses from probably around North America look at the Quebec market as an opportunity to have a good foothold for servicing the Americas.
Great, thank you. I've got another question that's come in. I guess, Dan, this is directed specifically at you. I'd be curious to know if the investment attraction team at Invest Quebec has had to make any adjustments to your industry targeting, considering the impact that the pandemic is having on different sectors of the economy.
We have, so in a couple ways. We have the priority sectors of the government, which is the electrification of vehicles and batteries, which is a huge priority sector, as well as technology and gaming, video gaming that is. And we've tried to realign based on COVID to look at some of the food manufacturing, food service industries, as well as transportation, logistics, and distribution with the Port of Montreal and the ports that we have along the Fleuve Saint-Laurent. And also looking at data centers. You know, we've always had a focus on data centers because of our price of our power, but it's just becoming more and more prevalent right now. So we have taken a look at that. Will I say we've significantly changed it? No. But what we've done is we've gotten a little bit more specific in our priority sectors as a province.
Okay, thank you. I know we're up against the hour, but I'd like to end with one last question. Dean, you talked a lot about financing and what financing action types of financing, structures of financing might actually make the biggest difference, both for small and medium-sized businesses, but also for the larger ones, manufacturing. I wonder if each of you could just close us out here, just to talk about what do you see as kind of what would be necessary in terms of financing to really help the sectors of the economy that your organization is most used to. Dean, maybe you could give us a quick look. I know you stated that a little bit, but I'd love to hear a recap.
Just to recap, a couple of things: grants, not loans. Small businesses don't want loans, and small businesses are just debt averse, and it's a really interesting quandary they're in because it may be necessary for their business to survive. But remember also there's 16 million baby boomer businesses in the next 3 years that need to transition ownership. And that means that we're going to have a huge shift in ownership of companies. So a baby boomer may may be forced to choose to go out of business rather than go in debt in order to continue the business. So we may see quite a drop off in the baby boomer owned business sector. So there are just a couple more things to think about.
Thank you. Megan, what would you have to say? What are you seeing in Fayette County in terms of financing and what would be most useful?
I mean, I second Dean, is that grants and definitely some of our neighboring communities are using that. They need cash flow now. I do feel like we are in a good place where a lot of our restaurants have reopened and our retail's reopening. And so when I followed up with a lot of our businesses who were worried about financing, they said, well, at least we're back open. At least we can. And so it's been that fine balance of economic recovery and health recovery, but just getting the consumers coming through their store. But I would agree, grants are great. And we have a neighboring community that has a lot of data centers, and they're even working with the data centers on grant funds. So that's another really unique model that we should look at more too as well.
Thank you, Dan.
I think being the two of us, the Canadians on the call, probably maybe a few others, we operate very differently in Canada, especially from a grant incentive type play through Canada, sorry. And I think being the fact that Invest Quebec is a financing corporation and you know, in simplest terms, people call us a bank. Yes, grants would be great, as well as certain types of loans that we found to be very effective for our clients, depending on the size. Grants are much better for the small businesses. Some of our larger, 1,000+ employee are looking for more of a long-term loan, and whether that is a repayable loan or non-repayable loan, which is the proper way for us of saying a grant. We are looking at supporting businesses in whatever way that we can to make sure that they stay open here. So like I said in my presentation, I'll send that to you right after, is we probably have about 5 or 6, maybe more levels of financial support that we're looking to help some of these businesses with.
Wonderful. Thank you. I could spend a lot more time with all three of you. I have to say that I found this particularly interesting, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to share with us what's happening in your regions. Dean, we're all very interested in the survey. I'm sure there's a lot more to come out of that, and I would love to be able to share your slide decks with everyone. I know I'm already getting a number of requests to see them. Thank you all for taking the time to share your work and what's going on in your organizations. Thank you all who have attended for taking time out of your busy days. I wish you all good health and prosperity as we all try to come out of these challenging times. I will be in touch then with all these materials. Thank you very much and have a very good day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.